Welcome to NFL Talk. We're diving into a game that left fans and analysts scratching their heads, the Houston Texans versus the Detroit Lions.
It had all the makings of a straightforward win for the Texans.
Yeah, you see 5 interceptions on the stat sheet and you think, okay, blowout.
Right, exactly. 5 picks usually spell disaster for the team on the receiving end.
But not this time. The Texans somehow managed to lose this game despite intercepting Jared Goff, the Lions quarterback, 5 times.
5 interceptions. And they still lost.
Let that sink in for a moment. It's practically unheard of in the NFL.
Right. You just don't see teams losing with that kind of defensive performance.
So how did the Texans end up on the losing side of a 26-23 scoreline? That's what we're here to unpack.
It really is a head-scratcher.
Let's start with the first half. The Texans came out firing on all cylinders. Their defense was stifling. Stroud was making plays.
They put up a commanding 23 points. It looked like they were cruising to an easy victory.
Exactly. It felt like they had the game in the bag.
But then the second half started and everything changed.
It was like a completely different team took the field.
The Texans' offense went silent. They couldn't move the ball. They didn't score a single point.
And the Lions, despite Goff's struggles, chipped away at the lead.
Eventually pulling off a stunning comeback.
It was a tale of 2 halves.
And unfortunately for the Texans, the second half was a complete disaster.
Now Stroud has taken responsibility for the offensive struggles.
Admitting that he needs to lead the team to score more points. But the question is it all on him?
I don't think so. This seems to be a pattern for the Texans this season.
Right. They've consistently struggled to maintain their momentum after halftime.
They just can't seem to keep that same energy going.
In fact, they haven't scored a second-half touchdown since Week 6.
That's a worrying trend that goes beyond just one game.
Definitely. It suggests there are some deeper issues at play.
Coach DeMeco Ryans has expressed his frustration.
Especially with the missed opportunities to capitalize on those 5 interceptions.
It's like they had a golden ticket to victory and just let it slip away.
They had so many chances to put the game away.
But just couldn't convert those turnovers into points.
It's incredibly frustrating to watch.
So what exactly went wrong in the second half? Was it a coaching issue? Play calling? Poor execution by the players?
It's likely a combination of factors. It's rarely just one thing.
Let's break it down and see if we can pinpoint some of the key issues.
I think that's a great place to start.
First, the coaching staff needs to take some responsibility.
They didn't seem to make the necessary adjustments at halftime.
It felt like the Lions came out with a new game plan.
And the Texans were caught flat-footed.
Second, the play calling became too conservative in the second half.
It was almost like they were playing not to lose.
Instead of playing to win.
Which is a dangerous mindset in the NFL.
And finally, the players simply didn't execute as well in the second half.
There were dropped passes, missed blocks, missed tackles. It's like they forgot how to play football.
It was a pretty stark contrast to the first half performance.
Yeah, it was night and day.
So what can the Texans do to fix this problem?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
First and foremost, they need to figure out why they're struggling so much in the second half.
Are they getting tired? Are they getting complacent? Are they overthinking things?
Once they identify the root of the problem, they can start to address it.
It's like going to the doctor.
Yeah.
You need a diagnosis before you can get the right treatment.
They also need to be more aggressive on offense in the second half.
We can't just sit back and hope to hold on to a lead.
They need to keep attacking.
And keep the pressure on the opponent.
And finally, they need to execute better in the second half.
That means making the catches, making the blocks, making the tackles.
That sounds simple.
But it's the key to winning football game.
This loss to the Lions was a tough one to swallow.
But it could also be a valuable learning experience for the Texans.
If they can figure out how to fix their second half woes, they have the potential to be a very good team.
They definitely have the talent.
But if they don't, they're going to keep struggling to close out games.
And ultimately fall short of their potential.
What do you think is the biggest factor contributing to the Texans' second half struggles? Is it coaching, play calling, execution, or something else entirely?
That's a tough question. There are a lot of moving parts.
Let's dive a little deeper into those possibilities and see if we can get to the bottom of this.
Sounds good to me. Let's unpack it further.
Let's start with the coaching staff. They're the ones calling the shots, making those in-game adjustments, especially in halftime.
Right. It's their job to see what's working, what's not, and adapt the game plan accordingly.
And in this game, it felt like the Lions coaching staff really outmaneuvered the Texans staff in that second half.
Definitely. They came out with a different approach after halftime, and the Texans just didn't seem to have an answer.
They looked unprepared for the Lions' adjustments, almost like they were caught off guard.
Exactly. And that's a problem because it shows a lack of adaptability.
It's not just about making adjustments, though. It's about getting the players to buy into those adjustments and execute them effectively.
Absolutely. If the players aren't on the same page as the coaches, even the best adjustments won't make a difference.
You need that synergy between the coaching staff and the players for things to work smoothly.
It's like a well-oiled machine. Everyone needs to be in sync.
Now let's talk about play calling. Another area where the Texans seemed to struggle in the second half.
Right. The play calling became a bit too predictable, a bit too conservative,
They seemed content to just run the ball and try to milk the clock.
which unfortunately played right into the Lions' hands.
Yeah, it allowed the Lions' defense to anticipate the plays and get after Stroud.
In those situations, you need to keep the defense guessing, keep them on their toes.
Be a little more creative, a little more aggressive on offense.
Exactly. Take some risks. Don't let the defense dictate the flow of the game.
And that brings us to execution. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how brilliant the coaching is or how creative the play calling is if the players aren't executing.
You can have the best game plan in the world, but if the players aren't making the plays, it's all for nothing.
And in the second half against the Lions, the Texans just weren't executing.
There were dropped passes, missed blocks, missed tackles, all those little things that can really add up.
And in a close game like that, those mistakes can be fatal.
They can absolutely swing the momentum of the game.
So what's the solution? How did the Texans fix this issue?
Well, it's not a simple fix. There's no magic bullet, unfortunately.
It's likely a combination of factors that need to be addressed.
Right. It's going to take better coaching, better play calling, and better execution.
It's about finding that sweet spot where all those elements are working in harmony.
Exactly. And then committing to that approach.
The Texans also need to develop a killer instinct.
That ability to close out games, put opponents away when they have the chance.
Right now, they seem to lack that edge that separates the good teams from the great teams.
They need to find that hunger, that drive to dominate.
This loss to the Lions was a tough one, but it could also be a valuable learning experience.
Definitely. It exposed some areas where the Texans need to improve.
If they can take those lessons to heart, they can still turn their season around.
They have the talent to be a competitive team.
But they need to start making changes now.
The longer they wait, the harder it's going to be to correct course.
What do you think needs to change the most for the Texans to be successful in the second half of games? Is it primarily on the players to execute better, or do you see coaching and play calling as the bigger issues?
That's a really good question, and I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken or the egg scenario, isn't it?
Exactly. Do the players need to execute better so the coaches have the confidence to call more creative plays? Or do the coaches need to open up the playbook to give players more opportunities to shine?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think the Texans need to find a way to get both sides working together more effectively.
You need that trust, that communication between the coaching staff and the players.
Absolutely. They have to be on the same page working towards the same goal. And right now it feels like they're not quite there yet. Like they're working against each other instead of with each other.
The coaches are hesitant to take risks because they're not sure if the players can execute, and the players are hesitant to give it their all because they don't know if the coaches believe in them.
It's a vicious cycle, and it's holding the team back.
And breaking that cycle starts with leadership, both from the coaching staff and from the players.
The coaches need to instill confidence in their players. Give them the freedom to make plays. Show them that they trust them.
And the players need to step up and take ownership of their performance. Show the coaches that they're capable of executing at a high level.
If the Texans can find that balance, that synergy between coaching and execution, they have the potential to be a very good team.
Absolutely. The talent is there, but potential only gets you so far.
They need to translate that potential into consistent performance.
This game against the Lions was a microcosm of their season so far. Flashes of brilliance followed by frustrating stretches of inconsistency.
They've shown they can compete with anyone, but they haven't figured out how to do it consistently for 4 quarters.
And until they do, they're going to be a team that's hard to predict. A team that's capable of both great things and head-scratching losses.
So what's the takeaway here? What can the Texans learn from this game and apply to future matchups?
I think it comes down to building that trust, building that communication between the coaching staff and the players.
Maybe they need to simplify things in the second half, make sure everyone's on the same page, reduce the risk of errors.
Or maybe it's as simple as making sure the players are conditioned to play at a high level for all 4 quarters.
There are a lot of potential solutions, but finding the right ones is going to be crucial for the Texans' success moving forward.
Absolutely. This deep dive has really highlighted the complexities of a game that on the surface seemed like it should have been a clear-cut victory.
It's a reminder that even with a dominant defensive performance like we saw from the Texans, football is a game of inches, a game of moments.
And sometimes the team that makes the fewest mistakes, the team that executes most consistently in those crucial moments, comes out on top.
Well said. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thanks for joining me for another deep dive.
It's always a pleasure to break down these games with you.
We'll be back soon with another look at the NFL's most intriguing matchups. Until then, goodbye, and see you in the next video.